we're going to demonstrate that the E-101 joint sealant adheres to galvanized steel, one of the most difficult substrates to get adhesion to, wet or dry. Now, the E-101 will adhere to any substrate, wet or dry, as long as the substrate is clean. So it's important that the substrate is wiped clean. So it doesn't make any difference if it's wet. So we're going to apply water over the top of this, and now we're going to gun the sealant. Pause. Okay, now that the sealant's been applied, we can begin to test the adhesion by trying to peel or curl back the sealant from the substrate. And we can tell that it is totally adhered. We're now looking at sealant that was applied 3 days earlier, and we are going to do a peel test to test the adhesion. We have cut back a tongue of sealant and we're peeling the tongue back. And what we want to do is experience cohesive failure of the sealant, as you have just seen, and not adhesive failure. The sealant is well bonded to the substrate, even though it was applied wet. We'll now apply the E-101 self-leveling joint sealant to concrete and asphalt, wet and dry.
Before we pour the water down the joint, I gotta save a little bit because I gotta do that. Okay, so now we're gonna do a wet surface on concrete. What we're trying to do here is demonstrate that the E-101 will adhere to a wet surface as long as the joint is clean. Obviously, dirt will interfere with the adhesion of the sealant.
We have wet the joint. We have cleaned the joint in advance of applying the sealant, and we're applying the E-101 SL joint sealant to the joint. We have swept out, as best we can, the standing water that existed in the joint. You can see it's still pushing out a little bit of water, and the sealant will self-level behind us. Once the sealant is gunned into the joint, it will not blister or bubble, even though the joint is wet, and will adhere to the concrete.
Really self-leveling. Awesome. Beautiful. Okay. That's beautiful. And if you look at this, are you videoing?
Yep.
Yeah. You can see it bonds. It's well bonded to the joint, wet or dry.
Just as we applied the sealant to concrete, wet or dry, we're now going to apply it to asphalt, wet or dry. Again, the E-101 self-leveling joint sealant will bond to the asphalt and will not blister or bubble. It's a single component sealant. It will cure and skin most of the time overnight. Guns very easily. And again, it is applied over concrete or asphalt, wet or dry. We want to push the water out of the joint if there's any standing water in the joint before we apply the sealant. But the wetness or dampness of the concrete or asphalt will not interfere with the adhesion of the sealant. Here you see me pouring the water over the joint and applying the sealant. I'm brooming out the standing water in the joint first and then going to apply the sealant. On this case, we're using the E-101 vertical grade sealant. We're just doing a little crack chasing here with the E-101. I'm pressing the sealant into place, making sure we have adhesion when you're using a vertical grade sealant. We're now going back to check the sealant that was installed when I poured the water over the pavement, brushed out the excess water. We're looking at the sealant. We can see it's got a few tire marks on it, but it's well bonded to the substrate, to the concrete, and is in excellent condition, fully cured 3 days later. Now moving over to where the sealant was applied over the asphalt, we now see that that is tightly bonded as well to the asphalt, both where we poured the water and we adhered it to the dry surface. The E-101 again bonded very well to the concrete and to the asphalt, wet or dry.